So when you're going to do a land, so a lot of people, you'll start and then realize there's the contract to buy a land contract. So right here, it's highlighted. So make sure you're using the land contract, which is almost identical to the contract to buy and sell. So the key up here, make sure you don't miss it, does it have a residence or does it have no residence? Because sometimes you could really be buying the land and maybe there's a little farmhouse or something on it that really isn't the value. The land's actually the value. That's when you're gonna use that there. Otherwise it would be, if the single family residence or the property, the building on it, then it would go under the correct different contract. So this is if there's like a little farmhouse or maybe most of the time it's just like a little farmhouse that really has no value. Maybe it's been abandoned or something like that. So it brings zero. You're really buying the land. So you want to make sure that you pull the right contract. And then of course you guys know about the buyers, the legal description. So here is where both legal descriptions would go when you have to. So I would write, you're going to put the first address in there, or you can CTME connect it. When you do two parcels, if they're on CTME, it's only going to connect one. So you'll want to make sure that they know you have a second one. So you're just going to want to put one of the legal address, or both legals, and then one of the also known as inclusions, personal property. Most 99% of the time, you're never going to use that. And you guys know you can make templates of these, so you don't have to rewrite them every single time. And if you don't know how to, you should get on CTME and get templates so that you're not, especially on a land contract, because they're all pretty much the same. So when we go into water rights, this is most important when you're doing farm and ranch. You're probably going to have some type of water rights, maybe Bessemer ditch shares, or high capacity wells. Yeah, wells. What else is out there? Wells, Bessemer ditch. That's what you see most. So, and there's different water companies that offer different water to different parts of an area. So one of the things to always do is ask. You're not going to know everything. Nobody knows everything. So always ask the sellers or any other water rights. And if they say yes, then we need to know where we can contact them and get that information, or have them contact them and get the information for us. So that's why it's so important here. And when we're doing a warranty deed, so when you're going, or any deeded water rights conveyed by good and sufficient, I always put bargain and sale deed. And the reason why is then it's recorded with the property. So if you don't put that, it doesn't, the title company can just transfer it like a water, they'll just transfer it in their name, but there's really no documentation saying, like in the county records or in the history, if you do a bargain and sale deed, it gets recorded. So I learned that a long time ago on the Mesa. There's, I wasn't doing it before because nobody told me to ever do it. So through some of the title company classes, that's what I've learned. And then any other water rights or well rights. If there is a well, please make sure you put the permit number here. That's a reference for them to go on the Colorado State Water Engineers website. The water permit, just make sure you pull it. If you don't know what the seller does, ask the seller to pull the permit for you and to send it over. If you need to search one, you just go to the Colorado State Water Engineer and then just search well permits. And if you have any questions, the way I learned to do that is I called the water place. You don't know, there's avenues to go to make sure you find out the correct information. So don't be afraid to ask. I think with most agents, you're afraid you're supposed to know everything, so you're afraid to ask the question. Never be afraid to ask the question, because yes, and you probably want a water attorney involved if it's too big of a deal.
So I'm getting ready to list a lot in Colorado City on probably Monday. Been back and forth with this woman, And that's one of the issues that I've tried to figure out. Gone to Metro District, limited information. They've been really nice, but I wanted to know, is there water and sewer to this lot? So
that, I would,
I don't want to interrupt what you're doing, but at some point if we could discuss that.
no, I would, who is their water provider? The Colorado City Metro, and you went there?
I went to them, they said, okay, we're gonna have our guy do a dig for you.
Right.
And 3 weeks later, I'm still waiting.
Well, that's how Metro districts run.
Right. And so I just told her, I said, let's just go ahead and list it for this price and buyer to verify water and sewer on their end.
Because you'll probably get it.
I could get a higher price for the lot. If there's water and sewer, that would be great.
So if there's a tap, you'll probably get a higher price for the lot. A tap because it's going to cost. But if, to me, water and sewer is expected to be at a property or very close to a property. I think it's the other way when it's not close. I would say the property's worth less.
Okay, so it's about a street over. So the street over is Jefferson. There are several homes on that street. And this is like Brush Creek Drive, something like that. So it's the next street. So I know water and sewer are close. Does have an electric box at the back of the lot. So
In the utility easement?
off on this side, street runs this way, utility easement is this way, that I could tell.
So
I actually stood at the lot.
So I would go ahead and list it, and I would put you're working on the water information and that to have them verify it too. Maybe they have a better connection, but the Metro District will take a little time. Did you call them again?
3 times.
Yeah, just keep calling. That's what I recommend.
Okay.
So, yeah, but that's how I would just for them to be able to verify it, because you don't want to guarantee something's there when we don't know it's there. So like when people put it has a water tap, you better make sure it has a water tap and it's been paid for, because it's not the same thing to say you can get a water tap. So on the Mesa, you have to give up a water share to get a water tap. So if you're selling vacant land, the St. Charles Mesa Water requires you to give up a water share to guarantee you a water tap. So when you're buying vacant land, you want to make sure that they've given up the share of water so that you can get a tap. So it's a big deal. And I think those water shares are well, it just depends who you talk to, but I'd say I usually value them around 8,000, 8,500, depends. So it's a big deal. And that's just, you get the water tap. Now you get to pay for it.
Yeah, the tap's $16,021.
Yep.
Mesa?
Yeah. And on the out here in Pueblo West, I think it's close to 14 a water and sewer tap. So if you say it has a tap, you want to make sure it has a tap, or you will be buying a $14,000 water tap. So like I never put that in there unless I verify that it actually exists there, and that not that they could just get one. It can be an expensive lesson. And then water and stock certificates, that is going to be like Bessemer ditch shares. They're actually stocks in the share. And then water and sewer taps. So that's where you would put, if it has one, where it's at and that it's included in the sale.
Is there an easier way to get electrical tap prices for land, like a state website we can use besides calling the utility company directly?
Nope, doesn't exist, because they're doing it by the linear foot. So they want to, what they're going to do is see where their main box is, and then they're going to basically just charge that buyer by the linear foot to get it to the lot line, and then they're going to pay an additional fee to get it to the house. So there's no easy way to do that. And I never quote those prices. So when somebody wants a price like that, I make the buyer call them, because I don't want to be the middleman. If you hear something wrong, or you write something down wrong, or maybe they were wrong and they told you the wrong information and you relay it to your client, it's going to be a liability on you. So when people are asking how close are the utilities, I say, call Pueblo West Metro District, or call Excel Energy, or call San Isabel, and most of the time they have big maps in there that you can go and take a look at and they'll have a good idea. Right now you probably can't because of COVID, but hopefully that'll end soon. And then you could go back in and talk to people. So utilities are extremely expensive. So just make sure that they're doing their due diligence. The one other thing I find out a lot is people buy houses in Pueblo West and don't realize we have a metro district because they don't read their title commitment and their agent never told them there's a metro district. So there is a protective covenant, which you're going to want your people to know. So no, you know, if your car's not running, trailers have to be behind a fence. If you have 4-foot weeds, you can't paint your house Bronco colors. You know, there's all of these rules in there. So you want to make sure that they can live by the rules. No cows unless it's 4-H. It's basically an equestrian community, which is horses. So just make sure that you're telling them. And a lot of people don't know they're on a septic system, which really blows my mind because they have to know they're on a septic system because it could fail and they need to know how to treat it. So if you're on a septic, you need to tell your people not to use a lot of bleach when they're cleaning because it's killing the good bacteria in the septic system. We were raised to bleach everything. We are a bleaching family. So when we went to a septic for our first time, you know, our plumber's like, he saw me cleaning. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What I always do." And he's like, "You can't do that."
On Vacant that I've had problems with is ingress, egress, because you get these parcels out in the middle of nowhere and you're supposed to have access to your land, but it's not that easy.
Right. Yeah. So you want to make sure you're checking on that too. And the title commitment. So I always tell people it's very boring reading, but they should read it. It's not your job to read it and interpret it. It's their job to read it and interpret it and then ask any questions that they may have. So, you know, we forward it saying, you need to review this. This is your plot plan. This is the covenant of the community. Make sure you can live with the rules, that kind of thing. And you're just required to look at their requirements and make sure that we get those done.
And that's for all of Pueblo West?
No, it's so there's areas that are on sewer and septic, or sewer and water has a sewer tap, and then there's other areas that have septic system.
Oh, gotcha.
And they're out. So all of the north, well, almost all of the north side is septic.
Okay.
And then around the golf course is sewer. But I would still check. I would still have them check with Pueblo West
And
Metro.
Usually I write the verbiage in my email that they need to contact title if they have questions, because title's your title specialist, because we shouldn't be answering.
And thank you, that's good information right there, because I have always questioned myself in how to handle
Yeah,
that.
well,
Thank you.
Damien taught a class and he
That
said,
is
you're not a
huge.
title specialist, you need to tell them to
Thank
contact
you.
Yeah. And I kind of prepare them that if they have a very common name, John Baker, there could be 20 John Bakers that live close here. And if they have a judgment, they're going to ask for the last 4 of your social to make sure that it's not you and clear you off the title commitment, which we can look at where those requirements would be. But I prepare them, and then I say the same thing as Jay. I'm not a title expert. I'm your house expert. I'm not your lending expert. I'm your house expert, so that they realize the other avenues of people that they need to contact and ask those questions. We just had a land deal that had a lot of water stuff going on in it. And thank God the other agent had already had a water attorney involved. It made it so much better because the buyers were able to ask all the questions that they needed. And then they had one-on-one with the water attorney, and then they agreed to the terms of the sale. I don't think it would have sold without the water attorney because it was pretty messy. So, and then growing crops. So sometimes this comes up if they're in the middle of a season, like whatever, pumpkins or corn. So you may have some kind of agreement of who, maybe they're going to keep ownership of the crops until they harvest. You're just going to want that defined in the contract. But most farmers are going to tell you exactly how it's going to roll. They won't let you get too far without having those in there, but you should always ask. And then alternative earnest money deadline. You guys know what that means. Just it's good faith money. It's your earnest money down towards the property. I always put 4 days after mutual execution. I don't want to hold their check in my office or in my car until we get executed. So I like to put after execution, and then that way you're not carrying around a check you could be liable for. You know, somebody breaks into your car and steals it or something like that, then you don't want that just hanging around. So I always do it after, but you could do it any way you want. And then the title deadline. So right now, because title's so busy with all of these deals, I'm giving them almost 14 days to get out the first title deadline. And then I'm going 14, 17, 20 almost to make sure that we have those done.
So I noticed on our contract, you had changed the title dates. And that's what I was wondering about. I didn't ask. But you changed my title dates on the counter.
Did I make them quicker or further?
No, you pushed them out a little bit,
Yeah.
so that's probably why, and I didn't
Yeah.
understand, so now I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and some of that, when it's you guys, I counter your deal to make sure that we're covered, that, you know, we got a little bit of time. Sometimes with other agents, I don't do it because it's not my job to teach them how to write a contract, but with you guys, it is my job. So I try and, if I see something that's going to be a hindrance during the contract, I'll counter it out and try and keep it clean for us so that we can move to a closing. But if she would miss her title commitment, or so in her case, I had the seller and she had the buyer. So that's my seller's responsibility to get the title commitment. So her dates must have been so close that I didn't
They
feel
were
we
tight,
could do it.
yeah.
Yeah. So I pushed them out.
No, I know. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. If you see dates that aren't going to work, there's no reason not to counter them.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so, so we go to record title deadline, off record title deadline, and are always the same date for me. And then the objections the same date. And then the resolution, I usually put 3 days out after 3 or 4 days, just depends. It depends on how the days fall. Cause if we have a holiday in between, then you might want a little more time. Association document. So you can have vacant land like Red Creek Ranch that has an HOA. So you want to make sure that you know if it has an HOA so that you could put those association document deadline in there. It's a very serious deadline for your seller. You need to provide the information. It's something that we send out right away with the contract. When we list the property, if it has an HOA, we want them to start filling it out right away. Because a lot of times sometimes it takes months to get HOA documents from people or their financials or things that we need. Not every HOA is really friendly to work with. So you want that information right up front so you could start working on it. And then let's just say that there's something they can't live with. They want to build a barnuminium is what one of my clients called it, where it's a big barn and then they have a living space in it. It's gorgeous. I think it came out, it's going to be beautiful, but you might have a covenant that says, or an HOA association that says you can't do that, or you can't park your RVs there. So you want to make sure that what the buyer's wants to use the property for, that they can. But that's a really, really big deadline for a seller. And then the seller's property disclosure. On vacant land, you're going to see it very rarely because a lot of times they don't know anything about the vacant land. In Pueblo West, they sold most of those lots in the early 70s. Some of those people have owned those lots since 70. They've never even seen them. They just bought them through a sale. So if you do know something about the lot, if they know about the water rights or an encroachment or an easement or something, you want them to definitely get that filled out. But a lot of times you'll see that there's no seller's property disclosure because they don't know much. And then this credit information is just if they're going to carry the note or assume the loan, which you don't, I've never seen one in my career, but it doesn't mean it hasn't been done. Obviously it has because it's in the contract. Appraisal deadline on lots, unless they're getting a loan, most people don't do an appraisal. You can if you want for your own knowledge, but you don't usually see an appraisal deadline unless they have a lender involved. So ILC, improvement location certificate. So what that means is, which is the improvement, and this is the lot, which is the location. It's saying, is the house or building on the right lot? That's what an ILC is. So they're just making sure that you don't have some kind of encroachment, like the house is set in here and now you're on the neighbor's property. And then a full survey, there's pin locations. There's different types of things you can get an ILC survey, pin locations or a full survey. If it looks questionable, if it looks like maybe the fence line isn't straight or you know, the mowing stops at a certain place and you may have an encroachment with another property, get it. I would definitely recommend a nice ILC or a full survey. They're expensive, but do you want to own a lot that has an encroachment? No. So, and then
won't show in a survey?
it will in a survey, and then you could terminate the contract, or you can make the seller fix it. Ask the seller to fix it. Go ahead, Tani.
Is the survey done when their structure on the property, like just a lot?
It could be either one.
You can do an LC for it.
Not an ILC. You have to have a house or a structure, improvement location certificate, or a survey.
I guess which is better, which is more
Survey.
inclusive, okay.
It's more expensive too. Usually with an ILC, you're just making sure, you know, your driveway isn't on your neighbor's lot or the fence line is, because sometimes in Pueblo West, you're supposed to have a 5-foot, bless you, easement in between, but sometimes they just do it right on the property line. And sometimes they don't guess where the property line's at specifically. So I've had quite a few fences that are encroaching on the neighbor's property. So you have to figure that out and come out with some kind of agreement or buy that portion of the property from them. But you want to know ahead of time. I've had encroachments in the fence line where it's going into the easement, the utility easement, because people don't realize that's a utility easement. They can put their fence in there, they own the lot, but when they have a utility problem, they're going to tear down your fence and you're going to put it back up because you can't really build in the easement. But a lot of people do it because they don't know any better.
What was the price difference on those two?
I don't know. You'd have to call. It depends on the property. Like an ILC can run 175 to 400. A full survey can run 1,200 to, depends how big the property is, up to $5,000. Depends what you have going on, how big the. So I always just call. And when you call a surveyor, they're just going to pull it up. They're going to know right away. They'll have an idea.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
For a statement item. I was just told that for putting a fence, an ILC isn't sufficient. To pin the borders, I was told is an additional $600.
That's right. Mhm. So an ILC is to make sure you don't have an encroachment. Like a encroachment doesn't exist. If you're gonna do a fence line, I would have your pins marked. And it just depends on the surveyor what they charge. So you guys know what a pin location is. So if this is a lot, it's telling you where each corner is of the lot, so you'll know that you're building on the right property. And if you're gonna put up a $5,000 fence, that $600 pin location may be worth it. Inspection objection. So that's just your right to do an inspection on a property. That's any type of inspection. So you can, your utility inspections, your dig maybe for a foundation, your soils test, any inspection that they want to do on the property at that time.
What was it?
Pardon me?
What did you say it was? What inspection?
Any there's all kinds of inspections, but mostly if it's vacant land, they're probably gonna build a house on it. And they're doing a soil sample
Sorry,
inspection.
I'm like super brand new.
That's okay. No, ask the question. Yeah,
Okay.
you don't know what you don't know, so never feel like you can't answer a question.
Okay,
Yeah, so that's what it is. They're just gonna see what type of maybe septic or system that they're gonna need, like if it's gonna be an engineered septic, or are they in shale? If they're in shale, it's gonna be a really expensive dig probably. So there's all those things that a buyer's gonna wanna know before they decide to put their house on there. And that's what they're looking for.
Can you put an inspection date and deadline cover termination based on the soil test, or would you put that in?
No, it covers it. That inspection is the soils test. For me, I never put, I shouldn't say never, because I do put some verbiage in there that says satisfactory of soil conditions in the additional provisions, but that's what the inspection deadline is for. So make sure it's out there. So right now, I can't get anybody to do a soils test for me for 3 weeks. They're all just slam busy. So don't put your inspection 14 days after you go under contract, because it's probably not going to happen. And the seller doesn't have to extend that deadline, so it's mutual agreement. So just remember, when you're writing these contracts, if you're on the buyer's side, you want to give your buyer plenty of time to do it. Because if they do that and they hold the property off and it's been 3 weeks and now the seller's upset and says, no, I'm not going to extend, then your option is to move forward without it or terminate. And if they really want the lot, it happens. Or maybe the seller got more money for it. Now they have a backup offer, so they're not going to extend it. They want the other deal. So make sure dates and deadlines are really important. And there is a template that you could do that as well, but you guys should know what they mean before you do a template. So in our office, I question you. Why did you put this date? What does this mean? Because I want you to know what that actually means, so that when your buyer asks you, or your seller, you can say, this is what this means, and this is why we need to push it out 3 weeks. And everything's a little different depending on how the market's working out. You know, if you can get an appraisal right away, why wouldn't you? I'd order it right away. So then the inspection termination, that would be, if they wanted to terminate, then you would have to give notice by that termination deadline, and you would put soils test or inspection is on the termination. And then that way that they did it during their period, so hopefully their earnest money is safe. And then resolution means if we have an issue, that you may want to give the seller a chance to fix the issue. Of course, they're not going to fix soil, but sometimes they'll drop the price if we run into shale or something like that. So that resolution is if you want to do an objection to the seller and say, hey, we ran into shale. Instead of 50,000 on this lot, we want to give you 45. They may do it. Now that they know they have shale, I don't know, but it's an option. Property insurance. I've never known anybody to get insurance on vacant land. I don't even know if it's available. Is it, Rusty?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, but who knows? Maybe it is somewhere else in another area, Vale, Aspen, Breckenridge, somewhere like that. Due diligence. These are, so everybody gets these messed up. Due diligence is, what are you asking for from the seller, right? It's not for you to, your inspection period is to do all your inspection, your utilities, your soils, your whatever, radon in a house, whatever inspections you want, that's your period to do all those inspections. Due diligence in the contract says, what are you asking from the seller? Do they have radon reports? Do they have soils tests? Do they have past inspections? Do they have an ILC or a survey? That's this deadline. If I don't have them, if the seller doesn't have them, I'm going to counter you and put NA because it's not applicable. We don't have them. Lead-based paint, if there was a property on there, and then estoppel statements, which is the renter's information, like what the renter knows about the property, if it's being rented, or maybe the crop issue, like if they leased it to another party You want that filled out so that you know what their agreement was with your seller. So because the seller's interpretation may be different than the renter's interpretation. And then closing date. So when you, of course, purchase price, never seen seller's concessions on land, but you could try anything once, see if it works. Earnest money, just who it's going to. New loan, so on land, it's either conventional or other, maybe like hard money, where they're borrowing it from what's called a hard money lender. So it looks like cash, but it's really not cash, and it's much more expensive to get than a regular loan. But it's good to use if you need to close quickly. And then assumptions would be if you're assuming their loan. If the seller is financing the loan, an attorney needs to write that, or the buyer and the seller need to write it between themselves. Real estate agents don't write those. Go ahead.
Question. You scrolled over the part where it asks if they do or do not have the funds immediately verifiable.
Oh, did I?
just want you to explain that.
Good catch, Jake. Good catch. Oh, right here. Is it right
No,
here?
a little bit.
Oh, so it does get skipped a lot, 4.4.2. So on these, you want to make sure they have the money to buy it, right? So when I get an offer that says cash, or it has 100 grand down on a house, I want to see the 100 grand. I want to make sure that they're not, because a lot of times agents will put it in there that they have 100,000 down and they do have it available, and they don't, because they got to sell another house or they have to sell another piece of property. So anytime they have money, now if it's $5,000 or $6,000, I'm not worried. If it's 50, 100, 200,000, I want to make sure that they have the funds available. So I need proof of funds. And it's okay to ask for it. It's not, people get worried like, oh, we're questioning if they have the money. Yep, it's my seller, and I'm not taking their property off the market until we know you can actually buy it. Now, it may have 100 down and says does not have the funds because there may be a conditional sale. So they don't have the funds in their account right now. And what it says is, do you have the money down? It doesn't say the cash that the buyer needs to bring to closing. That's what it's saying. So if you're saying that the buyer could come in with 50,000 in cash at closing, do they have it in their account right now that's verifiable? It's not saying the whole amount, like the loan amount. And I think people get that confused.
Okay, like on the one I'm doing right now, that was the last thing I checked because I was waiting for him to send me his bank statement.
Mm-hmm.
So that,
Yep, so it's verifiable.
right.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Tanya.
A new loan wouldn't be considered verifiable, right?
Correct. So it'd only be their money down. So let's say the house is, we'll go to house because land is not a great example. The house is 300,000. They have 100 grand down, and they're going to put 200 grand down from the sale of their property. So it's going to look like 300,000 in cash. I need to know that the 100,000 down, that they have that verifiable. Or maybe you have a $300,000 house, a $200,000 loan, and 100,000 down. We just want to make sure the 100,000 you have. And that can be 15, 20. If you're in a multiple offer situation and one says they have 25 and one says they have 5, you might want to make sure they have 25 ready, because sometimes it gets marked wrong and they're like, oh no, we won't have it until we close this other house. Well, then they don't have the funds readily available. And people read that wrong all the time or don't understand what that is asking. And it's so if you send me a cash offer, it's really not a cash offer until you prove you have money in the bank. Because sometimes they say it's cash and it's a hard money loan. And then conventional, so back on land. Ching, bacon. Seller private financing, that should be done by an attorney. Assumption normally doesn't occur. appraisal, if they're gonna get an appraisal, it's just like a house. They have the right to get an appraisal if they want to. And on big properties, they do. When you're talking big farms, they wanna make sure that it's worth it, and the bank's probably gonna put it on there, even if they're cash. It depends on the property. Probably a $10,000 lot in Pueblo West, probably wouldn't get the appraisal. Of course, cost of the appraisal can be by the buyer or the seller, just depends on the terms of what you guys have negotiated. Common interest community, that's that HOA where there's a fee for maybe keeping up the front of the area or the entryway or the roads, or you just want to make sure you know what that is. And then the association documents. So this is the list of everything they need to give you. So what we do is we just highlight this whole area and we send it to the seller saying, this is what's required in your contract for us to meet that deadline, so that they can go off. So all the rules, declarations, articles, bylaws, articles of organization, operating agreements, minutes, the insurance policies. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here. That's why you don't want to make your deadline so tight, because it takes time to get those together. So the state requires HOA companies to send an annual update of this to homeowners. So hopefully they have it, they saved it, but a lot of times they don't. So that's why it takes so long to get this information. And it's not for you to track down. That's for your seller to track down. They need to be responsible for contacting those people and getting them over to you. You just need to stay on your seller to do it. So you guys should read what's required. Title insurance just says that you're gonna get title insurance for if it's a vacant land, you're not gonna have owner's extended coverage. It's like gap insurance for a car. On houses, you should, I feel, don't know how Tony feels if he's watching, you should always mark OEC. Because if you have a title commitment issue, they are very expensive, and OEC is about $65. So even if the seller is like, oh, I don't want to pay that $65, and I say, if you have a title issue, it's going to cost us a lot more than $65. They usually say, okay, let's pay it, because they think it's going to be $500 and it's $65 normally, right in there, somewhere around there. But usually on vacant land, there's no owner's extended coverage, and the title company will have you take it out of there. Read your title commitment, make sure that they understand what they're buying. Make sure that on the title commitment that your people's names are spelled right. It's the correct property, legal description, and address. We found a lot lately where they're misspelling names, or they inverted a number when they were typing it in on zip code or something like that. So just make sure you are looking at those title commitments.
Or you end up needing an ILC and it's the week right before closing and you get a title commitment.
Right. So Jay said in your title commitment, if it asks for an ILC, it's required by the title company and it's the week before closing, and now you're trying to get one. It's very, very stressful, and you don't want to have to push that out, but you're going to know in your title commitment early. That's why you need those records, and then they'll update them as they're going, as they remove the conditions. New construction, sometimes builders do an ILC, sometimes they don't. We ask for one because I want to make sure that they built the house on the right lot and that we don't have any encroachments. And then if there's anything in the title, you have the right to object, you have the right to fix it, and you have the right to terminate.
I have a question.
Mhm.
I have a situation where, I guess it's happened a lot out on the Mesa. Family had a large piece of property, carved out a little piece for their kid, put a house on it. This particular situation, they went through the commissioners, they got it approved,
Mhm.
but it was never recorded. So I don't know, I'm understanding it's just like a rubber stamp thing, but what's the process there, and is that part of this?
Mhm.
I think that's part of the.
That's a great title question. Great. So that is exactly what I would call the title company with and say, what do we do? Because the title company's they're gonna want it recorded somewhere. And it is probably gonna come up if they're gonna get title insurance. So before I even, like if you're talking to them about listing it, I would ask the title company right away to run a E&O's errors and omissions, and O&E is
Owners and incumbents.
owners and encumbrances. So you would want to O&E. It's like $5. It's not expensive.
Okay.
But then you're trying to fix it before you're in a deal and ready to close and everybody's stressed out. And then oil, mineral, gas rights. Most likely water rights your buyer does not own. You own surface area. So always explain that to people. And if they want to know for sure if they own their mineral rights, they need to go down to the clerk and recorder and find out. Because a lot of people get surprised that they don't own them. And then here's where you're gonna mark the ILC and who's gonna order it and who's gonna pay for it. Just depends what you can negotiate. And then who it's gonna go to, which is normally the attorney.
I just want to add something on this. So a lot of agents will leave that blank when they send it over to you because they say that it doesn't apply. But I always make sure, buyer or seller, that I include it regardless if it's land or if it's residential, because I want to justify, because it is solely at the buyer's discretion if they want to get any of those things, but I want to specify who's paying for it and who's ordering it if the situation happens. And then I don't usually put the deadlines in the ILC deadlines. I'll just say only if required by title or lender. But there's been situations where something does come up and now the buyer's upset, and you want to make sure that's specified in the contract who's taking care of that.
Yeah, who's gonna be responsible for payment and who's gonna be responsible for ordering it. Because if you see it on your title commitment, it's your job to get it going. Don't rely on the title company to do it. Like just to assume they see it's a condition and that they're gonna do it. And that's good practice, just to make sure if it does come up, you have clarification on who's gonna be responsible for ordering it and paying it. And then seller's property disclosure, inspection, damage, liens, indemnity. Just saying if you mess up their property, you're gonna bring it back to the way they had it before they listed it. And then these, if you mark them in a contract, so this is not like residential, this is vacant land. It says that the seller will provide them. It doesn't say if in their possession, which the real estate contract, the single family or multifamily used to say if in seller's possession. Land doesn't say that. So if you mark this, you're committing your seller to doing it. So be very careful on what you're marking, especially if you're a seller's agent, or what you're gonna counter out. So if they don't, so one of them is phase 1, phase 2 reports, letters, test results, advisory, respective, underground storage tanks, Americans Disability Act. So if you don't have them, don't mark them. So I counter a lot of these out. Sometimes I get them and it doesn't say if in your possession. It says that the seller will do it.
Would you ask them to pin the borders as well, or would you usually be, or would they usually be something buyers would have to pay, them being the builder, sorry?
So on a new construction, would you ask them to mark the pins? That's the question, it sounds like. You could ask them. Yeah. If they're still there, they're probably ran over 100 times by the front loader because they're so amazing at knocking over our signs and running over them. And, they stick this high, so the pin's like this. You can ask them to do it if they can find them. It's a courtesy. They wouldn't have to.
Then you don't even know if they're accurate, right? If they've been run over.
Yeah, normally, like in Pueblo West, a lot of times they just knock them out by accident. You'll see the sticks and you'll see those little orange flags. That's where the pins are at. But a lot of times they just get ran over by the front loader guy. You can do, yeah, you could get a metal detector. Like my dad's got one, so he likes to go find them and that kind of stuff. So you could do that. But for clarity, I'd want to make sure, which if he has a survey, all they got to do is find the pins and mark them. But I would ask. And then if you click other documents and informations and you say soils test, you've committed your seller to do a soils test. So make sure that when you're reading the contract, that you know what it's saying. Don't just fill in the blanks. Zoning, so let's say they want to do something and they're going to need, I don't know, a business or something, and it's not zoned for a business. They might need a variance. So you just want to make sure that they check with zoning that they could actually do what they want to on the property. So anytime somebody says something like that, I'm like, oh, call zoning, here's their number. Because I don't want to be in the middle of the conversation. I want them to get the information from the horse's mouth. Conditional sale, that's if they had to sell something to buy it. Source of water. So there's some properties in Colorado that don't have a source of water. That's why you fill it out. Some people don't have wells. Some people don't have community water, so they have to haul it in. So it might be a cistern. You want to know, because you have a lot of people coming from the city who think there's a water tap at every house.
Quick question on the source of water. So I've had 2 agents lately. One didn't provide a source of water addendum, and I understand on land you have to because there's no seller's property disclosure generally. But they said for residential, if it is disclosed in the seller's property disclosure, that they don't have to provide the additional addendum.
That's correct.
But I believe that we at KW, Lori requires it to get our PAs.
If it's on the seller's property disclosure, it's disclosed.
Okay, all right, I didn't know.
It's one or the other. I always just do 2 because the addendum's a lot easier to fill out than all of the check marks and I don't want them to skip over it.
Okay.
But both are CREC contracts, so
Okay, I just didn't know because we had a deal where that happened, and I believe that she required it to have her. But I would guess that would be something I'd ask Lori.
Yeah, I'd ask Lori. And then closing instructions is giving the title company permission to close the contract according to the contract. What kind of deed are they providing? General warranty, special, PR. Look when people are listing properties. If it's a PR deed, put a PR deed. If they're offering you a special warranty, you can ask why it's a special warranty. And Jay will go through the whole thing of why a special warranty deed. Closing costs, who's going to pay for it? That's just the closing company fee, which is normally a couple $100, $300. Are they splitting it? Is one person paying it? If there's any transfer fees, so sometimes wells have transfer fees, augmentation, basically, not the actual well. Well, you have to pay so yes, there's fees. Just know what they are. If you have water. Colorado withholding just says that if the state requires the title company to hold funds, that they can. Prorations of the assessments, that's just saying who's going to pay for the association assessment up until closing. Normally the seller does, but I guess it's whatever you negotiate in your deal. And then any other prorations. Is there propane on the property? Are they going to get a credit back for what's already in the propane tank? Or are they just going to give it to them? So any kind of proration like that, you just want to ask. And then days. So in our office, we mark will not. It will not extend to the next business day because we want to know the date's the date. So when you do that, perfect example is we had property under contract and the inspection resolution deadline was on a Saturday, but he will go to the next business day. So now it was Tuesday at midnight. And we had an all cash offer come in on Friday. So we couldn't do anything until Tuesday at midnight. So basically, the resolution was going to come back, and if it was a difficult resolution, the seller was going to say, I'm not going to do anything because they want them to terminate to take the other deal. But we had to wait 3 more days for the resolution. So I don't like it. If it's a Saturday deadline, it's a Saturday deadline. So make sure it's not a title commitment. If it's an inspection, objection, or resolution, it's Saturday. Make sure you get it in. But on our contracts, the date's the date. Some people like the safety of having it go to the next business day. But honestly, you should be watching your contract dates as you're going. So if Monday's Martin Luther King Day, you might want to amend to extend your contract to a different date, right?
So in that case, what happens if you have your inspection resolution or inspection objection on a weekend, but then you only have a couple of days and your resolution's due, and then so that pushes it, that's pretty close, and I guess you'd have to amend.
Yep, you'd have to try and amend the contract, yep. That's why I don't like pushing it to the next business day. I just want to know my deadline's my deadline. Walkthrough home warranty, normally you don't see on land. I'm not a tax consultant or an attorney, so if you need tax or legal advice, you should seek it. Liquidated damages is your earnest money. Specific performance means you're going to buy the property. You're not going to back out, that you're committed. I've only had to do one in my life. It was pretty interesting. It says if everything goes to heck in a handbasket and you have an earnest money dispute, that you're going to agree to mediation before hiring attorneys. And then it says whoever loses pays, basically. So if you hire an attorney, you might be paying for both of the attorneys, but you've already agreed to mediation in the contract. And I always let the buyer and the seller know that, so that whenever, not every deal is going to run smoothly. There's going to be people who are upset. And when they're upset, everybody wants to hire an attorney. And we just want to make sure that everybody knows how the process is going to work. Once you've been in business a year or two, you'll hear the attorney a time or two, I'm sure. Termination, the buyer and the seller have the right to terminate. It's very hard for a seller to terminate because they have to bring the buyer back to whole. What is back to whole? That's what Tony and I always say. Like, what is it? Did their interest rate go up? Did they lose 1% in their rate? Do they have to pay them for that? Their earnest money, their soils test. So for a seller to terminate is a huge deal. It's a big deal. So I make sure the seller knows that they really want to sell their house. There's very few. I've had people that were going to retire somewhere else and went there and said, no, we're not doing that. I want to keep my house. So you try and negotiate it with the buyer. So, and then the buyer, of course, has all the outs in the contract as far as title, inspection, loan, appraisal, loan termination. And then it just says if you amend the contract, that it has to be signed by the buyer and the seller, so it has to be mutual agreement, and you got to let the title company know. So if you take out the ILC and you don't send it to the title company, they don't know to take out the ILC. So you have to keep the company aware. And then any additional provisions, so like on here on vacant land, we just put if for some reason it doesn't close, that they'll cover all the test holes, because you don't want them open for liability. The following are part of the contract. The only one that we normally put is the source of water addendum, unless like with Jay, he would have an addendum for those other properties. He would list it addendum A. The disclosures are the following have been provided but are not attached to the contract. Those are your disclosure statements.
If my land right now is a quit claim deed, I would change, I wouldn't keep it quit claim, obviously, I would change it to special.
I would call your title company and ask them what I would do. I would want to know why, like what would be the best benefit for my buyer or my seller. Quit claim just means they're not getting a title commitment. Is that what you want? Did you put a title commitment date in there? I would call the title company and ask them the difference, but usually on a quit claim, there's not a title commitment that's ran. So you don't know if there's any outstanding liens against the property or judgments. Unless I knew the person, so we quit claimed my dad's land to my son because we knew who was selling it and it had a title commitment when he purchased it, but just a quit claim deed between two people is pretty risky. Wonder if it was bought at a tax sale and now they can't sell it for 9 years.
It was from brother to brother.
So that wouldn't scare me probably, unless one of the brothers had a judgment. Hopefully they don't.
And what if the seller is out of town? They're in different states. Does that stuff get like FedExed over, overnighted, or?
Yeah, the title company will work that out with you. So there's different fees. They can email, print it, and then take it to a notary, or you can have it FedExed and there's a charge for that, or you can have a notary go and there's a charge for that. Again, another great title question. Don't be afraid to ask the title company title questions. They're the experts. They don't want you to screw up. They don't want to have to tell you, change this to something else or question it. So if it's a title, I still call. I've been in business 20 years and I still call. That's not my cup of tea. I just want to make sure we're protecting the client. If you have a title issue, it's a big deal. It's a mess. And sometimes you're paying attorneys to get you out of it, which the commitment's a lot cheaper than hiring an attorney because you still have an out. I have to talk to you about why they're quit claiming it between brothers. So we'll do that when we're off of class. Is there any other questions on chat? Go ahead, Lorraine.
Can you go into detail the specific performance box, 21.1 seller?
So specific performance means that one in my lifetime that I did with the elite team. And it says the seller may elect to cancel the contract and all earnest money, whether or not paid by buyer, will be paid to the seller. So if they terminate, it gets directly to the seller. And then it says, and retained by the seller. It is agreed that the earnest money is not a penalty and the parties agree the amount is fair and reasonable. Seller may recover such additional damages as may be proper. Alternatively, seller may elect to treat this contract as being fully in force and effect, and seller has the right to specific performance or damage, or both. So what it's saying is that that they're going to buy the property. So we, in our case, we had I had the seller, he had the buyer, and the buyer needed to get a couple of paychecks. It was a pharmacist or a doctor or somebody, and he was just starting at Parkview. And the specific performance said, you're buying it, you're committed to buy it. There's not an out. So if you fail, if you terminate, it's not just your earnest money. We're going to make you buy the property. And so it's very, like, you have to have a very serious person to say they're going to do specific performance. So once your deadlines are up, obviously, if it doesn't appraise or something, they have the right to terminate, but it's not the same as earnest money. So let's say I default, we go to closing and I wake up and I don't want to sell my house today. And so I don't show up, or the buyer doesn't show up. I'd be the buyer. I don't show up. The seller is going to keep my earnest money. I don't show up on a specific performance. You're going to take this to the judge and they're going to buy your house. It's a big deal. That's why you don't see it marked anymore. The default is liquidated damages, because most buyers are not going to do a specific performance. He did. It's what we required because my seller had an attorney, and the attorney said only if we do specific performance, so they can't back out and we're not off the market during the summer. The buyer agreed to it and we worked it all out and he purchased the property. It's just very...
Can you counter that in? You're representing the seller and say, yeah, okay.
Absolutely. You can make it specific performance. Will the buyer take it? I don't know. Depends how serious they are on the deal. If they know they're a solid buyer, they know the property's in good condition and they don't think anything's going to come up, they know they're going to get the loan, I'd do it. All right, go sell something. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.